This is Remote Daily, your daily dose of inspiration.
Welcome. I'm Felix. I have the honor to host you on our new season where we focus on the future of work. And on our agenda today is activating you. Our guests are co-founders of a wellness company focused on helping organizations increase engagement and productivity. Sandy and Greg, it's such an honor to have you with us on Remote Daily today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having us.
Thank you to Beth Message, who connected us in the first place, and also welcoming everyone who's here from your respective teams, the Aspen Group and Gap. We just had a roundtable with people leaders, and we started it with an icebreaker question that is a little tricky that I want to put to you, which is, what is the best piece of advice that you have been given recently?
I think one of the best pieces of advice I've gotten recently is we're never really ready or prepared for that next step, right? Internally, we want to make sure we have everything ready and we're all set. But if you're thinking about applying for a job or taking that next step or doing whatever it may be, you don't always have to be ready. You have to be willing to learn. But no one has everything together. So just try, right? You just have to give your best effort. So I think that's what I've heard the last couple of weeks. Just go for it.
I love that. And it's such a great fit for our live experience that we're putting together here, right? We just show up and then everything else falls into place. Thank you so much, Sandy. Greggy, how about you?
I would say own it. And I say that because there's a space where I think, and a lot of my peers, a lot of my friends, I feel like we're in this space where we're trying to figure out either what's next or where we should stand. And more and more lately, the spaces that I've been in, Sandy and I had an awesome trip recently that we were on. And when I was sitting in that space, I had to remind myself that this was by design and not by mistake. And I mean that just in all of nature's confluences, right? We were there for a reason. We earned our space to be there, and because of that, we need to own it. And the more you own it, the more things will come in front of you because you're owning that space. So super important for me, and I'm trying to live in that space and own it more and more.
Fantastic. Such great advice for the Remote Daily team here and for the Remote Daily community. When you go live, whether it's hybrid, whether it's virtual, whether it's in person, two pieces of advice that really resonate. I'm going to share one that I heard recently that stuck with me, which was take your work seriously, but not yourself. And I'm still working on that one. I love the quote though. And I am really thinking about, how you can do that when you're, especially in these times where there's so much negativity and so many people having a hard time. How can you still have that sense of not taking yourself too seriously? But the things that you do for others or with others.
What has become a challenge for Sandy and I this year, one of the things that we're talking about this year is it's all about momentum. How do you take the first step? All right. How do you make the first movement that allows you to build on that movement and build on that movement? You're build enough momentum that you're in the space where now you're always listening to yourself or you're taking that advice from yourself. So that's where it is, that moving from that inspiration and maybe that motivation into actually building momentum and activity.
And I love that you just said following inspirational quotes is incredibly hard. It's so true. You see them everywhere, right? At stores, at people's homes, now in the chat, and they always sound great. But, when you try to follow all of them every day, it's basically impossible. So thanks for bringing that up as well. And as always, it's good to follow the artists. I want to get into activating you, Fanny and Greggy. You kicked off this platform about 2 years ago, around the same time as Remote Daily started becoming a company and a team, with a webinar about habits. Oh my God, let's not get too deep into that. But the story of activating you is that you met while working together at Gap. Sandy, you moved closer to where Greggy is, New Jersey, became close friends, and then you decided to be quote unquote accountability partners for each other. I love that so much. But please help me understand, because today is literally the first time that we all see each other. You had spoken to the team before, but we haven't met. So I hadn't had a chance to ask you this question. What is an accountability partner? Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, I think for us, we had worked together as peers for quite some time, and we're friends outside of work. And we the pandemic was getting ready to start, and were both focused on building the right habits and doing the right things. And for me, I'm somebody that needs someone else to hold me accountable. Like, I need someone to be like, hey, did you do this? Or, did you do this, the things you said you were going to do? Or are you holding true? Or checking in, every couple of days, or someone that I am accountable to. And we had been working so close together, and we were friends. And I said, hey, I'm trying to do this thing here, but I need an accountability partner that's really going to push me and be honest and give me feedback and hold me accountable, and not just like when it's convenient, like say the things that have to be said. And so we agreed to be accountability partners for each other. And it turned into this like great thing, and, holding each other accountable, pushing each other to be better. And then we were 8 minutes apart when I moved to New Jersey, which was fantastic. Wow. And so our families lived in the bubble together. So we kind of, Greggy's family was the only family my family saw. So then we just got to know each other on a more personal level as well. And we had started having some conversations from there around like, if we can do this in our personal life, like how do we help other people do this in their personal and professional lives as well. So that's kind of how it started.
That's great. And Greggy, like, I mean, again, this is one of those things, right? It sounds so easy. Oh yeah, I have an accountability partner, but it's incredibly hard work. So how does that look for you on your end, Greggy? Like just on a regular Friday, like today, how are you being a good accountability partner?
It's checking in. We if Sandy gets a little quiet, I gotta check in. That's a text message to say, how's the week going? Let me know. Or sharing my accomplishments over time, right? I'm also in the same space where we're trying to figure out and get the habits to be in our best space that we can, right? And we want to do that not only for, summer is coming, and we had this whole joke about the yellow polka dot bikini. We both want to be able to wear that in the summer with no shame. So, reference to an old commercial. If you're old like me, you'll remember it. But we both have goals, personal and professional, that we're trying to work towards. And just having someone there who kind of knows what those goals are and is championing you and wanting you to get there. That's somebody who's just going to check in on you and ask, hold you accountable if you're not doing it, or give you a tip or a pointer to get you in the right space when you need it. So it's been awesome to have Sandy as that over the last couple of years. I would say also starting a business with someone is starting a business is scary, period, right? I think there's a lot to saying, hey, I want to try to strike it out on my own and do something, right? It's as much as people talk about being an entrepreneur, it's a scary space. But if you have someone who is willing to stand by you and believe in you and you believe in them, it adds to that space. And we want to be great for each other. And that's another space of accountability for us. We can talk to each other about the spaces where we're nervous, or we're not owning, right? When I say own it, we're not owning the space that we think we should occupy. And it's like, hey, you know what? We can own it. We can ask for that. We can reach out to this person. Those things become easier when you have the right partner to hold you accountable.
Wow. I mean, you both have a lot of experience in the people space. Greggy, you with over a decade at Gap, now senior manager of talent development, and Sandy, you as at the Aspen Group, if I understand correctly, is a health service provider. So even more, geared towards people, and it's a difficult industry to be in. So you have a lot of experience when it comes to dealing with people, leading people. What are the pain points that you saw around you in your corporate workplace that you defined as the unsolved problem that you're gonna put your business against? What is it?
I think one of the things that I think is different when you're kind of on the outside as a consultant versus in a corporate organization is your ability to be laser focused on one thing, right? So when you work in a corporate environment and you're in L&D, there's a whole host of things that you have to focus on and try to accomplish for the organization. But as consultants, when we're working with other organizations, we can be laser focused on solving the problem that they're trying to solve versus like, I want to do this here and this here and this here. So it allows us to really focus on a particular space and really make sure that we're talking about the applications of habit forming and things like that. But, really we're focusing on, if you look at one cup and fill the cup, we're focusing on like what's in this cup versus like trying to boil the ocean all at one time. Greggy, you can add to that too, but I think that's one of the things that we've seen.
Yeah, the idea of having a full cup or whatever has been one of the things that we play around with a lot. But I would say one of the things that I recognize is 100% true. If you work on a team within a company, you're dealing with every problem the company has, and that can be frustrating. You love to be in a space where you're working to a strategy and getting things to happen. So when you see success, it's great. But when you get outside help, they can focus on one thing. I would think about it like having a trainer or a coach. When you go to the gym, you walk into a gym or a space like that and every machine is there and it's staring at you and it might be scary. But if you have someone who says, hey, my only job here is to help you for this 1 hour. And for this 1 hour, let's get you in a better space. All of a sudden, it clarifies some things. When it comes to that also, I think one of the major things I see inside spaces, sort of like what we just talked about with inspirational quotes. I get like 1 hour to talk to you about developing yourself. And I'm going to give you 10 bullet points and you got to work on all of them. Well, where we're looking at and having conversations is let's talk about what your habits are around the things where you're finding a lack of success. And if we can pick one, right, one that will have a great impact, how can we help you build a habit and then put that habit within systems of your business that allow you to replicate that action over and over and become easy? You can do it once, right? Then you get confidence to apply that to other spaces. And the more we can try to do that, it gives us an opportunity to help you get closer to your goals, help you get closer to your actions. And the spaces when I've seen people take that approach, we've seen more success.
I can share one. My days are always too short. There's always too much. There's always the meetings and there's actual work that has to happen afterwards, but there's already another meeting. That's a problem I share, I guess, with a lot of people in the workspaces that you encounter as well. So could you give me an example for what I could do to develop a habit that helps me feel like the day shouldn't have 48 hours?
Well, where I'd start with that is, that's true, right? So just asking you, Felix, that's true, right? That you only have that time. So once you know that, there's an agreement that you can make with something. The work's going to be there, right? There's a space where you just have to, I'll go back to saying own that, right? So once you know that that's true, well, then how can I live within those means and make deals with myself, right? That will allow me to stay in that space. I have a buddy of mine who's a really great friend, and he was having a hard time sleeping. And when we talked about it, we literally were like, well, let's talk about what habits you have around bedtime. And he was telling me, well, you know what? I got to work out. So I work out and I have to read every day. So I start reading before the night and I'm reading. And I'm like, well, what are you reading? I'm reading news and I'm checking out articles and and he starts to notice, wait a minute, every night I'm reading articles about the news and the president and what's going on with the economy. And he's working himself up. And now he's trying to go to sleep and he can't, right? So literally there, he's saying, hey, if for you right now, sleep is a priority, right? You want to sleep better so you can be better throughout the day so you can be great at work. You're working yourself up at night. With you, Felix, the same thing. Is it something where, hey, during the day, I'm so stressed out about all the things I had to do. Well, what habit could you have that would allow you better space to do that? Is it to start to list out the things you need to do every day and say, well, if I can get 50% of this list done, will I feel better about that? Whatever the number is, maybe that's it. For me, one of the things that we focus on when we talk about activity, right? It's one of our pillars. It's gratefulness. On Friday, I have to find a way to say thank you about where I am. It puts me where I am and nothing more. I don't have to necessarily say, oh, Monday's going to be crazy and go into it. And if you're like me, you get the Sunday scaries, being able to find habits that allow you to say, hey, wait, maybe I'm just writing a list of the things I needed to get done. And then I know what the list is for the next piece, for the next week. And I can leave that there. I can come back to it. The work's always going to be there. So that might be one of the spaces where I would say, Felix, start writing down a list of the things you need to do to get done. Know that list is there and also know the work isn't going away. So you'll be able to get back to it.
The last thing ties into what Deb just shared in the chat about the stop reading emails time. Basically a habit that helps what you just said, working yourself not up, but towards a more relaxed night, and fantastic way of saying my time is more valuable than other people's to-dos that just landed in my inbox. So thank you for that habit, Deb. And you were just sharing the pillars, Greggy. The pillars on your website say habits, momentum, fuel, and activity. So would you mind sharing one example for each of those? We already talked about habits a little bit, but how do those four go together? Could you maybe walk us through one example?
Dan, you
want
want
to
to you can start off?
You
Oh,
could start with habits. Yeah.
well, here's where it comes with habits. I read Power of Habits a while ago, and it's probably one of the most impactful books I've ever read. I love reading books about business or self-help. And what I found in there was there's this this idea or the understanding of that your brain uses habits to make life easy. And if you can understand the power of those habits, you take advantage of it. You can leverage spaces where all of a sudden you're starting to build habits in the places that you want them. I also am an instructor of a spin class, and I always get asked, like, how do you stay so fit, or what do you do? I'm like, well, I've started to look at the habits I want to have to make this work. My first spin classes were horrible. Literally, like they were horrible, horrible, horrible. But I didn't have any good habits. I would start a class off, I'd be so nervous, I didn't know what I was going to do first. And then I started with a stretching routine. And literally my stretching routine, I could do it right now without any question because it's a habit. I raise my arms, I shake my wrist, I do all these things. And that habit of just settling myself allowed me to start and have a good success over time. It's the same way. If I could start to find habits around the things that I think are important, I put myself in a good space to allow myself an opportunity to use the power of those habits to change my behavior.
Got it.
I think for fuel, which is one of the next ones for us, that's really being intentional and focusing on what you take in and not just like what you eat, which is, important as well, but it's all the things you take in. What are you reading? What are you watching? What are you watching particularly before you go to bed? Or are you someone that grabs your phone right when you wake up? Like all of those things are what you intake, and that has a significant impact on you. So really thinking out holistically about what fuels you and all the things that you're taking in.
Wow, when we talk about, that adds on, it keeps going, it builds on itself. So once I know those things that fuel the best version of me, and I want to get to a space where I'm getting closer to living my best self, I can't do that all at once. Or it would be foolish for me to try to do it all at once. I see so many people who come into spaces like, I'm going to change everything in January. February comes, they didn't do it, and now they're down on themselves because it didn't happen. Where if they took one thing and said, hey, under the right conditions, I can get this mass to move. We have this this metaphor that we use here. It's about an avalanche. And avalanches are they're actually amazing things, and they're one of the most powerful forces known to man. When you study what an avalanche is, literally it's potential energy being able to move. What usually happens is under the right conditions, huge masses can move great distances. So in the same space, can I put the right conditions in the place I need, right? If I can put the right conditions, all of a sudden I can have a trigger, and then that trigger can lead me to successive moves. So when I talk about something like, I want to read more books. Well, do I have access to books? Do I have an account for a space to have it? Do I need it on virtual or that? Well, the ones I can say those conditions are there. What's my first step? Is it to say I need to read one book this week? That's a lot. Can I read 5? Can I read for 5 minutes a day, every day until I build up that habit? And then if I can plan out successive steps, it's not just saying today I'm going to read 5, but I'm going to read 5 today and maybe 5 tomorrow. And I want to be at about 20 pages by the end of the week. And I can start to build momentum towards getting to this space. All of a sudden, I'm going to start finding the answers for the things I need to do. And I've attached those same principles to any of the successes I've had in my life is when I worked on building momentum towards that space, as opposed to trying to get it all done in one.
Wow. Yeah, it's powerful for me who struggles with a lot of what you just described. Thinking about that, I was just thinking about an interview I recently read that was about the digital workplace, and the digital workplace being poisonous for everything you just described, because it always puts us in a constant way of being distracted. So you start one thing, oh, Slack comes in. You start another thing, oh, text message comes in. You start a third thing, oh, I forgot there's a meeting coming up. I have to prepare because I didn't look at my calendar. So how do you both limit your exposure to the digital beehive that is the workplace today? Do you have special techniques around that, Sandy?
Sure. I mean, I think for me, it's intentional about what I'm picking my phone up to look at and for what. And there's times when it's like, okay, I'm going to look at Instagram, for example, to see what's going on. And that's a 5-minute break for me, but it's not constantly picking it up. And there are times when I'm very intentional that I do not have my phone with me. So for me, I'm a mom, Greggy's a dad. Time with my daughter is really important to me. And I block that time at dinner to say, I don't have my phone with me. this is dedicated time for her. So like I'm fully present, focused on her talking about her day. And I don't even have it there as a temptation. And I've seen a lot of like, I think Simon Sinek talks about it, right? A lot of us have our phone in front of us all the time, but we turn it over if we're at dinner or we're at, having a conversation with someone, but it's like, it's still there. And so if it beeps or buzzes, right, it's still a distraction. So if there's something that you're really focusing on, whether it's, focusing on design time or doing something, really that requires all your attention at work, or it's being present with your family, it's making sure that you remove the temptation or the distraction so that it's not even there for me to see or look at. Like I also have a watch. I take my watch off during those times as well. So I'm not constantly getting like, I could be, if something happens, we all look down at our phone and that takes the focus off of who we're talking to or what we're trying to do. So I think it's being cognizant that those things are constantly in our lives and making sure that we're making the time and being intentional about what we're looking at and for how long, and then getting back to what we needed to do.
And Greggy, you told us that activating you is founded on the idea that, and we just walked through a little bit, just quoting here, building the right foundation of habits can help you activate your best self.
Yep.
And activating your best self, we also learned that through your pillars, is built on small steps, incremental steps that eventually, hopefully, become an avalanche that really changes a lot. What I got hooked on, though, and when we prepared the show, was the best self. Because I couldn't even define my best self. I don't even know, because I'm not there yet. The avalanche hasn't, come down. So how do you define that? Like, how do you define best self?
Well, one thing I would say is that this is like those spaces where like, I'm not an expert on that. But what I'll tell you is, Felix, you've had moments in your life when everything moved easy, when things felt good, the sun was shining just right. In college, we used to call it the glow. Me and my buddies would be like, man, if I'm having a glow, my hair just right. If I go to the club that night, I'm on, right? And it's funny because that's like a juvenile way to think about it. But there are moments when I feel like I'm in my space, I'm owning it. And if I think about all the things that led to those moments when I feel really good, when I'm giving a presentation and I can feel I'm connecting with the crowd, and I start to think back to like, what put me in the space that allowed me to do that? Well, maybe I prepared really well. I felt really good about what I was preparing. I practiced. I said the words out loud. When I'm teaching, and I talked about teaching a class, those moments when I'm teaching a class, I feel really connected to the people. Those are the moments that I want to try to tap into all the time. The more I can tap into those moments, I'm feeling like I'm in my purpose, I'm in my space. That's when I'm activating the best version of me. Felix, there's been interviews you've done where you're asking a question and you knew like that question made everyone perk up, right? Those are the moments that you want to tap into more. And the more you tap into those, you're elevating everyone around you. Everyone has to evolve as you evolve in those spaces. And that's really where we're aiming to try to get people to think about it. It can be disguised in saying, well, at work, we want you to change a behavior or a habit, or in your life, we want you to change a behavior or a habit. But really, if you can find those spaces where it just feels good and think to yourself, well, what put me in that space that let me feel that good? What fueled that version of me? And if I can fuel myself that way more often, all of a sudden I'm living in that space more regularly.
And have you achieved that for yourself, Greggy? Like out of the daily situations that you have?
On Monday I do, on Tuesday maybe not. Wednesday I try again. And that's a really important thing to say when I go back to talking about having a partner to help you do that, right? My wife is a great partner for me that she sees if I'm dieting or I'm trying to eat a certain way. If she sees me cheating a little bit, she's like, that's not on your diet list. And I'm like, okay, I got to go back to it, right? But those things are helpful to me because when I'm in that space, when I feel healthy, when I look good in my mind, right, then I feel better. I can present myself to the world in a way that allows me to feel like I'm closer to that version of my best self. When I'm doing work that matters to me, and whether it's with activating you or in my other professional space at Gap, when I work there and I'm doing things there, I want to do things that make me feel like I'm having an impact. And if I don't, right, that's not me being my best self. And those things all of a sudden, if I'm not speaking up in a meeting, if I have an opinion and I don't share it, those are the versions of the best version of you. When you're in a space and you're like, I should have said something there, and you don't. The closer we can get ourselves to that, the challenge, the way we can challenge ourselves to bring those parts of ourselves to life more often is important. The last thing I'll add to that is, you talked about it, the first activity that we did when we had our first webinar. Now think about that, Sandy, and like what that was like when we put it together. But the first activity we did was say, hey, what is the best version of you? What's your best self? Tell me what a good day felt like. Write it down. Write it down when it feels like, hey, if there's a moment that you can say, you know what, when I did this thing, I felt complete. I felt whole. I was interacting with my family the way I wanted it to be. I was interacting with my friends the way I want. I showed up at work the way I needed to, and it got me these things. And if you can really do some research around what put you there, what fueled that version of you, well, now the answer is just to say, can I get more of that? And if I can get more of that, then I want to put the habits around me that allow me to stay in that pocket as much as I can. And the more I do that, the better I am.
So what you're telling me is basically, when I have a great day, it's not a coincidence. It's not just some chain reaction of things that I can't control. It's actually something I unintentionally maybe put together so that it happened that way and on that day, and that I can replicate, just like
it is
a
by
physical
design.
experiment.
It is by design and not by mistake. And what happens is when we are being present, that presence allows us. I think Aaliyah said it in here. All we have is right now. Well, if all we have is right now, if all we have is this present moment, right? Then I need to reflect on now. I need to ask myself, what worked today? What was really good about how my day went? And if I had a sticky moment, what put me in that sticky moment? And then if I think forward out and say, well, I want to have more days like that, what puts me there? For me, it's a workout in the morning when I can start my day there, right?
Mm-hmm.
It gives me a chance to start work, to start my day in a different space. But in other spaces, it's the same thing. Can I clear out my email queue at work before I get into the workspace I need? So I set my day up right. What do I have to do on Sunday? So Monday's great. Any one of those things.
You evaded one question though, which was about the digital way of prioritizing during your day.
Well, Sandy queued that one, so I'll let her have that, but I'll add this one to you. On my desk, I keep this thing. It's like a simple thing, but I'll tell you why I got it. It's a timer, right? And I work in 90-minute intervals. Anything I have to do, I try to dedicate 90 minutes to it. Any like brain work that I have to do. So whether it's research, whether I'm writing, I try to do it 90-minute intervals, and I give my mind a break after 90 minutes. Usually I found like that's where my timing ends. I had to buy this because what I was doing was I was getting on my phone to set a timer, and then I would get on my phone, and like you said, a text would come, I'd answer that. Well, let me check Instagram before I start this 90 minutes. And all of a sudden 30 minutes went by. I wasted 30 minutes. Now I only got 60 minutes. I gave myself less time. So I said I needed to find something different. I literally bought this timer on Amazon. It was like $10. And what it allows me to do is set a 90-minute, right? 90 minutes goes, this runs. And then when the 90 minutes is done, if I'm feeling like I was gaining momentum and I want to come back, I pause anyway. I pause, I check in with my family, I check in with, with Sandy, maybe I'll say I had a good 90 minutes. And then I eat, I water, I stand, and then I come back to it. I might set another 90 minutes. It just gives me a way to say, in those moments, I'm going to take this time and be here. I want to be where I'm sitting, where my feet are. And that has been a huge help to me. That takes a lot of pressure off of it. And in the days where I'm looking and I'm planning right now, over this next couple of weeks, Sandy and I have a lot of work to do in our minds. And I'm saying to myself, well, if I could dedicate even just 90 minutes every day, that builds itself up. That's the avalanche, right? 90 minutes every day over the next couple of weeks, all of a sudden will feel like something else when I look back at it. So it's important for you to find those things.
Fantastic. Yeah, I like that a lot. The Pomodoro technique taken a step further, where you chop up your time into pieces. I'm thinking also, when I think of you and your work, of the many people that are right now in jeopardy job-wise. You have both, I guess, experienced situations where you had to have conversations that you didn't want to have with colleagues that were on the way out and didn't maybe know yet. You have looked at the end of the life cycle of employees many times as talent professionals. And now we're looking at a freshly laid off, pretty young population of over 200,000. And it seems to be adding every day. It is a certain sector. It doesn't seem to impact the entire economy as a recession just yet, but it looks pretty grim for a lot of people, especially in remote work environments. So what advice do you have for all of the people that are maybe listening, watching right now, that are facing this kind of permanent instability on a personal and a professional level? How can they activate their best?
I'll add a couple things, and then I know Greggy has some things to add as well. I think, I think sometimes, and we've seen that a lot, people invest so much of themselves into their organization, and they define who they are by where they work. And so when you lose a job or something like that, you feel like you've lost a part of yourself. And Beth talked about it, that unconscious coupling of like decoupling of, you are different than your job and the company that you work for. So I think knowing that in yourself and finding what gives you passion, and knowing that you can bring that passion to other places. I also think a lot of times we think about what we're losing in those moments. I lost this, my coworkers, this or that. I think it's being able to see what can you gain and learn from this moment. Because a lot of times people like when that happens, it forces people to find the things that they're passionate about, and they might go in a completely different direction. And so I think of it as a learning opportunity, and what do you have to gain from those moments versus focusing on what you have lost behind you. And so I think that those things are highly important. And the other thing I would say is, what are the habits, or what are you passionate about, and how can you create those habits in your life? Because a lot of times we're moms, we work, we do this, we do that, we do 1,000 things, and saying like focus on taking care of you feels selfish at times. And it's like, well, I don't know how to do that. But in those moments when you're so stressed out, or there's so much pressure, or you just lost your job, like that's the time where you have to double down and focus on you, because you can't take care of anyone else around you if you're not taking care of you. So those are the moments where you really do need to prioritize yourself, and think about, how do I take care of myself so that I can take care of other people and find what I'm really passionate about, and dive into that, and know that like my worth comes from me and what I believe versus, what happened in a previous happening.
So try to uncouple yourself from identifying with your job too much. Take good care of yourself, and try to not look at it as a loss, but as a gain of things. Those are the 3 things I just learned. Is there anything to add from your end, Greggy?
I thought she smoked that answer, so I'm not going to add too much other than that. Other than I would say, what are you doing for you now? So I know it's happening to people, and it's a weird space, but if it didn't happen to you, or maybe it happened to your peers, don't just wipe your brow and say, oof, okay, it wasn't me, and continue to work the same space you've been in. I started becoming a spin instructor literally because I was, in the time I was, and it's not that I was unfulfilled at work, but I had, when you work for someone else, there are points and periods where their movement is not as fast as yours, right? Like I was like, hey, I want to do more stuff, but my title and my job's not allowing it. So I'll find something to do that will feed me and fuel me. When I did, all of a sudden, because I was better in this other space, I was actually better at my job, right? I was like, oh, I'm spinning and I love that. My weekends are great. Guess what? My energy was lifted in my other workspace because I wasn't putting so much pressure for everything to come from where I work, for all of my accolade, anything I needed to come from there. So when I start to recognize that, hey, the thing that I can do for myself, the things that I can chase my passions, whether it's art, whether it's music, right? There's so many fun things you can learn. If you're not learning and doing something for yourself, those things will sustain you in the moments when someone else's dream might not. And I think it's important that you start to attach yourself to things like that.
Thank you, Greggy. And I want to ask you to wrap it up about your own journey as entrepreneurs, because you already said in the beginning, Greg, it's super scary to start your own business, especially when you have been part of a large organization for a long time, where you might have had your own realm, but you weren't responsible for the payroll and the well-being of everyone around you. So your company is now about 2 years old, similar to Remote Daily. I'm so glad we went on that journey at the same time, in this crazy time, ventured out and with the help of so many that, by the way, you see in the room here, you see the Remote Daily community meeting your community, which is fantastic. And what has been most challenging for you both in building and growing your own business and platform?
I think, we talked about this. I think a couple things. I think one of the challenges that we face is in some of the organizations that we work with is, a lot of times organizations know that they want to do something, but they just want it like, we'll bring you on, you do this and like, go do that. So we can say that we did something. And we strongly believe that culture is caught, it's not taught, right? Everyone has to be able to speak the same language, including leaders. And it only works if everyone is bought in. So part of what we do is come in and say, hey, this has to start at the top and we all have to be aligned that we're all going to do it together, versus like, you can come in and do this and like we check the box, but we never really got to like, ultimately, if we do that, come in and do something for, you know, part of your team and you're not bought into it, you're not speaking the same language, ultimately it's not going to be successful. And so we want you to be successful. And so I think that's the biggest piece, is we've seen the most success in organizations that understand that and let us talk to their leadership and get us all aligned before we do anything else, so that we're all speaking the same language. The other thing I would say that's been most challenging for us in growing our platform, and you kind of talked about it at the beginning, is, you know, I think something that all entrepreneurs face is finding out your worth, right? So how do you identify your worth, and how do you know what you bring to an organization and quantify that? We've been studying a ton in this space and practicing a lot here to learn. But I think, you know, trying to work within the budget that people have, but also understanding like what we bring to the table. And so that whole piece as an entrepreneur of like finding out what your worth is and how do you bring that and articulate that to all the organizations that you work with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe one thing that helped us and myself a lot was talking to people every day who are potentially the people we want to work with. A few are in the room right now, and just very openly ask them, like, what do you think we are worth? What do you think what we're doing is actually worth? And it's a weird question at the beginning, but you always get an honest answer from someone who knows you. So yeah, that's something I learned to ask that question quite bluntly, and it helped me a lot to start. But I want to finish with Brandon's question here. You know, Greggy, you said in the beginning you would just text Sandy and be an accountability partner by checking in. How do you do that with your clients? Do you text the CEO and say, "Hey, buddy, where are you?"
Oddly enough, this is probably I love that you asked that, Brendan. In every facilitation that we've done, one of the questions that we ask before we leave, and we always want to make sure we have enough time for it, we challenge the team and we say, "What could we do for you?" Right? And it's always something that's met with like some pause, like, "Wait, what do you mean?" We're saying, "Hey, we're giving you an opportunity. We're asking you, what could we do for you? What would it be? Would it be giving you our content? Would it be giving you the content? Do we want to check back in? Let us know what you need." And then we survey and ask questions to, survey and immediately get feedback to say, "Hey, here's what your people were talking about." I think in the beginning, what we want to do is to front load it. We want to front load accountability as much as we can. And to what Sandy spoke to before, is if we can set ourselves up by talking to the leadership team, and the leadership team can understand what's being taught. The leadership team can buy into the concepts and say, "Hey, we're going to look to build momentum over time." Now they're speaking the same language. All of a sudden, there's an opportunity for them to say, "Hey, you learned this thing. How is it affecting you? What's working within it?" And we give them tools to do that too. So if you can front load the accountability a little bit to start there, and then the second piece of it is, again, we ask, what would be best for you? I wouldn't. We're looking to customize it. We want to be extensions of teams to a certain extent. So the answer for this team may not be the same as the other. We had a great conversation we worked with AT&T at one point, and one of the things their team asked us for was like, "Hey, if we could have these recordings, we could listen back to them and we could share them with different teams." We were able to provide that. So it just depends on where it comes, and we get really excited by being challenged to try something new to help them be accountable.
Great. Thank you, Greggy. And this recording will be shared for sure. And I invite everyone who feels comfortable having their camera on right now to share some virtual love, glitter, not ice, stormy rain, but really warmth, and from the whole Remote Daily community, and including, of course, the final piece of music for today that we offer for you. Greggy, Sandy, before we close, what is the final message that you would like to share with everyone? Maybe a way to support you, maybe an announcement, anything you would like to share before our final song of the week.
Well, I'll say, one, thank you for having us. This was an honor to be able to do. Even cooler that you're starting at the same time. Just imagine where we'll be 5 years from now when we do our next interview and say, "Man, look what we did in 5 years," right? That'll be amazing. To all of you that were engaged in the chat, engaged in on screen, we appreciate that. And I would say, really think about what is that best version of you, those days that you have that make you feel whole, make you feel good. Sometimes it's brief, it's a quick moment, it's a high five that you give somebody, it just feels really good. Figure out what those moments are and try to be clear about what gets you there, what fuels that version of you. be there more often, and it elevates everyone around you. And that's what we hope to do. Reach out to us even after this. If you want to talk to us at any point, reach out. We'd love to connect with you, help you problem solve. That's what we aim to do in any space. So thank you.
Sandy, your final message.
I think what Greggy said, we're all here to support you and want to connect and help you find that best version of you. Super grateful to be here. It was so grateful, and I'm so glad everyone took time out. So thank you for having us, and we look forward to coming back and celebrating, like Greggy said, together as a both team.
We have to throw this last piece in there. Beth is in the chat. We are starting a podcast with Beth. It's going to be called
Fantastic.
It's focused on our personal and professional lives. That is literally what it's going to be talking about, just how those two spaces combine and talking about the space in between. We're so excited. We've been working on it for the last couple of months. So in this quarter, just another space where we can kind of continue to tap in as we think about. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks to our guests, and thanks to all of you. Bye-bye.
This is Remote Daily.